Humanity had tolerated humiliation longer than any species expected. For decades, Earth attended every council summit with disciplined restraint, absorbing insult after insult, while the great powers dismissed humans as an unstable, inexperienced frontier species. That restraint vanished the moment the convoy died. The diplomatic fleet, unarmed, brightly marked, carrying ambassadors and mediators, entered regulated space under full compliance. It never exited. Council investigators offered excuses so empty they felt like mockery. First they blamed navigational drift, then claimed a pirate ambush, then suggested humanity had staged the attack to gain sympathy. The message was clear: human lives were expendable, and the Council believed Earth would swallow the insult as it always had. The broadcasts reached every civilian on Earth. Footage from the wreckage showed twisted hulls and the unmistakable signatures of Council-grade weaponry. The galaxy might lie, but physics didn't. Humanity watched the fragments of its diplomats drifting through cold vacuum, and a quiet, controlled fury took hold. This time, no speeches came from Earth's leaders urging patience. There were no statements about maintaining dialogue or seeking mutual understanding. Instead, for the first time since joining the Galactic community, humanity fell silent. Across Earth, officials canceled trade agreements, recalled ambassadors, and froze every cooperative program. Military channels, silent for years, activated in synchronized bursts of encrypted traffic. Old rivalries between nations evaporated instantly. Generals who once debated funding allocations now stood side by side, united by the same overwhelming clarity. The galaxy had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Meanwhile, the Council maintained its arrogant posture. Representatives accused humanity of overreacting. One delegate even suggested Earth should apologize for misinterpreting an unfortunate event. Others demanded reparations from Earth for disrupting interstellar stability. The recordings of those meetings leaked within hours, enraging billions. Humans worldwide felt something snap, not in chaos or panic, but in a deeper, more decisive way. The species that had endured centuries of internal conflict suddenly became a single organism with a single purpose. Humanity's diplomats drafted their final statement, a precise, cold declaration asserting that the destruction of the convoy was not a misunderstanding, it was an attack. They demanded accountability, transparent investigation, and the surrender of those responsible. The Council rejected every term, confident humanity lacked the power to enforce anything. Their smirking replies played across Earth's networks. Viewers noted the dismissive glances, the condescending tones, the laughter. Those expressions etched themselves into human memory. While the politicians scoffed, independent analysts whispered a different truth: the attack had been authorized. The Council feared the rapid rise of human technology. Earth's innovations in propulsion, AI, and energy systems outpaced established powers. Humanity's adaptability unsettled them. Destroying the convoy was meant as a warning, a demonstration that Earth should remember its place. Instead, it became the final mistake in a chain of arrogance. As details emerged, the public's anger sharpened into something colder. Humanity didn't riot. There were no chaotic protests. Instead, millions volunteered for service. Research labs extended their operating hours. Factories retooled without needing orders. Everywhere, people acted with a calm determination that unsettled even their own leaders. It wasn't rage driving them, it was resolve. Earth's analysts noted something unprecedented: no internal faction resisted. No political opposition condemned the shift. Humanity, fragmented for millennia, finally spoke with one voice. The Council had intended to intimidate a divided species. What they created instead was unity forged in grief and betrayal. The turning point came when Earth's final ultimatum reached the Council. It was brief, stripped of ceremony. Return those responsible. Acknowledge the attack. Provide restitution. The Council dismissed it immediately, again assuming Earth lacked the strength to respond. They issued one last message, dripping with mockery. If humanity believes it can enforce such demands, it may try. That message circulated across every human colony, across ships, stations, academies, and cities. The reaction was instantaneous. Humanity understood the implication. The galaxy believed humans incapable of defending their own people. That belief had shaped every insult, every sanction, every manipulation. Now, it had culminated in the murder of diplomats. At that moment, humanity ceased being a patient participant in galactic politics and became something far more dangerous. The silence lifted. Orders were issued. Systems awakened. Humanity stopped asking for justice and decided to take it. Humanity's silence didn't signal hesitation, it signaled preparation. The moment Earth cut contact with the Council, every classified protocol designed for existential threats activated. Nations that once argued over borders, budgets, and influence synchronized seamlessly, operating like components of a single machine. Orders moved through encrypted channels that had remained in use for generations, but the personnel receiving them reacted without confusion. The world had expected a moment like this for far longer than the galaxy realized. Deep beneath civilian megacities, bunkered command centers lit up. Generals entered rooms built during eras when humanity feared only itself, now repurposed for a far larger threat. Orbital platforms reactivated dormant weapon systems. Defense satellites realigned to new trajectories. Old strategic doctrines were discarded. Humanity didn't intend to endure another attack, it intended to make sure no one ever attempted one again. Shipyards became the heart of the shift. Facilities that publicly manufactured exploration vessels revealed their hidden layers. Entire floors dedicated to civilian research pivoted overnight to military applications. Engineers worked without pause, driven not by orders but by a shared understanding that humanity's response needed to be decisive and overwhelming. They restored projects once shelved as unnecessary: dark propulsion engines, nanoarmor plating, adaptive shield matrices, autonomous strike drones, and the titanic carriers that had existed only as theoretical models. Beyond shipyards, laboratories accelerated experiments restricted for decades. Weapons calibrated for raw destructive potential were re-examined with new intent. Human scientists had always possessed an unusual obsession with breaking limits, but now they channeled that obsession into a singular direction. Across continents, AI clusters connected into a unified network to coordinate logistics, supply chains, and fleet construction. Efficiency soared beyond anything the Council believed possible for a primitive species. Training centers saw an unprecedented flood of volunteers. Soldiers, engineers, pilots, medics, analysts, every specialty filled faster than systems could process applications. What made it more remarkable was the absence of bravado. Recruits didn't seek glory, they sought justice. Drill instructors noticed the difference immediately. Trainees absorbed techniques with unnatural speed, driven by a clarity of purpose no propaganda campaign could manufacture. In orbit, humanity's black projects came into view. Carriers emerging from lunar dry ducts dwarfed anything in Council registries. Their hulls carried angles and materials unknown to alien sensors. Smaller vessels, razor-shaped, silent, predatory, completed maneuvers impossible for known propulsion physics. These weren't new creations. They were hidden accomplishments, the result of decades of innovation forced into secrecy to avoid provoking the very powers that had now attacked them. The Council's intelligence branches attempted to monitor humanity, but every probe sent toward human space vanished. Spy satellites returned corrupted data. Listening posts detected nothing but static. Entire quadrants of human territory seemed to darken, obscured behind layers of counter-surveillance technology that should not have existed. Analysts and alien governments debated whether humans had discovered new physics or were bluffing. They didn't know the truth. Humans had been preparing countermeasures since the first day they joined the galactic community, anticipating that one day their rapid progress would threaten established powers. As Earth mobilized, human colonies mirrored the transformation. Mining worlds increased output to unprecedented levels. Agricultural planets doubled production, stockpiling reserves. Frontier settlements fortified orbital defenses and expanded local militias. Every colony understood the stakes. If humanity faltered, none of them would survive the Council's retaliation. Diplomatically, humanity remained silent. No transmissions, no retaliation, no warning strikes. That silence spread fear more effectively than open declarations ever could. Some species interpreted it as humanity collapsing internally, others feared it meant the opposite. Council diplomats argued that humans were merely posturing, insisting the galactic order would hold firm. Privately, several members expressed unease, noting that the usual human transparency had vanished entirely. Then, after weeks of preparation, Earth transmitted a single message to every Council world. It contained no threats, accusations, or demands. It was a formal declaration of war, the first issued by a species in recorded galactic history. The document was clinical, legally flawless, and unmistakably final. The galaxy had never seen a species move from mourning to mobilization with such precision. Humanity had not acted out of impulse. It had acted because the time for discussion had ended and the cost of restraint had become unforgivable. The quiet preparations were over. The next phase would show the galaxy what humanity had spent decades preparing for. The Council assembled its fleets with absolute confidence. Thousands of ships formed defensive lines across key hyperlanes, convinced a show of force alone would intimidate humanity back into submission. Admirals boasted on open channels, assuring their citizens that Earth's declaration of war was little more than emotional theatrics. Their fleets, built on centuries of accumulated dominance, had never faced defeat. They believed humanity would crumble the moment they encountered a real military. That illusion shattered the instant human vessels emerged. The first encounter occurred near a Council-controlled relay. Dozens of cruisers waited in perfect formation, weapons charged, shields raised. Seconds before they announced their ultimatum, space around them distorted. Not with a familiar warp signature, but something sharper, silent, clean, undetectable until it was already too late. Human ships materialized inside the formation, not at the edges. No species had ever executed microjumps with that level of precision. The Council commanders froze, unsure whether the readings were real or instrumental failure. They received their answer when their systems collapsed. Human vessels released narrowband pulses that bypassed shielding entirely, targeting the circuitry of enemy ships with surgical accuracy. Engines shut down. Weapon systems rebooted uncontrollably. Communications drowned in static. In less than 10 seconds, half the fleet was drifting, powerless, without a single shot hitting hull plating. The Council had prepared for a conventional battle. Humanity delivered a technological ambush no simulation had predicted. The active ships tried to retaliate, firing volleys of plasma and ion fire. Human vessels responded with maneuvers that defied gravitational expectations. Their engines didn't burn brighter. They simply moved, as if inertia belonged to another set of rules. Council gunners watched their targeting algorithms struggle, losing lock after lock. Projectiles passed through empty space where human ships had been milliseconds earlier. It wasn't evasion, it was prediction. Every movement, every firing angle, every probable tactic had been calculated before the battle began. Then came the counterattack. Human ships unleashed kinetic weaponry with terrifying precision. Where most species relied on energy weapons, humanity deployed rail systems capable of accelerating tungsten rods to velocities that turned even shielded cruisers into perforated shells. Every strike landed exactly where structural integrity was weakest. Council captains realized they weren't fighting opponents, they were being dissected. When a panicked commander finally ordered a retreat, the hyperlane collapsed. Human interdiction fields expanded across the region, trapping the entire fleet. These weren't standard blockade tools. This was new technology, something that shouldn't have existed, yet was being deployed with flawless execution. Council crews watched their escape routes vanish and understood, for the first time, that humanity had prepared for every scenario long before this war began. Ground confirmations followed days later when outposts along the frontier reported hostile landings. Expecting infantry skirmishes, they encountered something else entirely. Human soldiers didn't advance like other species. They adapted instantly, shifting formations mid-conflict, improvising without hesitation, exploiting weaknesses faster than defenders could react. Their endurance defied biological norms. Their armor absorbed impacts supposedly capable of disabling armored vehicles. Their coordination resembled a single organism rather than individual units. Defenders described the same realization. Humans weren't fighting out of hatred or vengeance. They approached combat like a task to be completed with maximum efficiency and minimum wasted motion. A council colonel later stated, in a shaky transmission, that humanity fought like a predator that had never forgotten it was born on a death world. One station broadcast a final message before going silent. "They're already inside the command deck. We didn't hear them coming. We didn't." The transmission ended. Across the Council territories, fleets scrambled to regroup, but human forces never attacked the same way twice. One system faced stealth cruisers. Another faced drone swarms that disabled infrastructure with electromagnetic detonation patterns no one understood. In yet another, human hackers infiltrated starbases remotely, forcing them to power down their own shields. Every report carried the same conclusion. Humanity had studied the Council for years. Its weapons, communication protocols, shield harmonics, navigation systems, and political arrogance. And now, humanity exploited every vulnerability with precision that felt less like warfare and more like a controlled demonstration. The galaxy finally realized why humanity had remained quiet for so long. Not because it was weak, but because it had been observing, preparing, and calculating. When war finally erupted, humanity didn't simply fight. It executed. Panic didn't spread gradually, it detonated. The Council expected humanity to strike a few border worlds before fading under the collective defense of the galaxy. Instead, human forces advanced with such precision and speed that entire sectors collapsed before the Council even understood the scale of what they faced. Reports from surviving commanders contradicted every assumption the galaxy held. They described fleets appearing without detectable approach paths, fortresses falling in minutes, and soldiers who fought with an efficiency bordering on machine-like. Each report ignited fear in species that once mocked humanity's naive ambition. Council chambers became battlegrounds of their own. Representatives shouted over one another, blaming rivals for provoking humanity. Alliances that had stood for centuries fractured as each species tried to distance itself from the convoy attack that triggered Earth's retaliation. Some factions insisted humanity must be bluffing about the scale of its forces. Others argued that only total surrender could prevent extinction. Every meeting ended in chaos, with no unified strategy beyond denial and fear. Civilians across the galaxy panicked as well. Worlds close to human-controlled space saw a mass exodus. Spaceports filled with refugees abandoning planets not yet attacked but terrified they could be next. Rumors spread faster than official broadcasts could correct them, stories of invisible human ships, unstoppable drones, or human soldiers who could fight for days without rest. The truth didn't matter anymore. Perception alone shattered public confidence. Financial systems buckled next. Human cyber warfare hit with such precision that major trade networks crashed overnight. Banking clusters froze, credit lines dissolved, and entire economies stalled. Nothing burned, nothing exploded, but the galaxy woke to find its wealth inaccessible and its infrastructure compromised. AIs responsible for regulating traffic, energy distribution, and communications displayed unknown errors. Silent proof that humanity had infiltrated code that supposedly required hybrid encryption and biological keys. Instead of destroying systems, humans manipulated them subtly, turning stability into unraveling disorder. Amid that chaos, smaller empires cracked. Several species began back-channel negotiations with Earth, offering intelligence, resources, or neutrality in exchange for survival. None of these overtures reached the Council's main channels. They were intercepted by humanity long before that. Some species didn't even attempt diplomacy. They simply surrendered discreetly, withdrawing troops and abandoning Council directives. Their leaders understood the truth earlier than others. Resisting humanity was not bravery, it was suicide. Council military academies scrambled to update training protocols. Instructors taught cadets new doctrines specifically for human engagement, emphasizing unpredictability, avoidance, and psychological resilience. Yet those guidelines already felt outdated by the time they were printed. Human forces evolved faster than the Council could study them. New encounters contradicted previous intelligence. Weapons that had been effective one week were useless the next. Every adaptation the Council attempted met an even sharper countermeasure. Political propaganda collapsed as well. Leaders who once spoke confidently about punishing humanity now delivered trembling broadcasts assuring citizens that dialogue remained possible. Some governments banned footage of human victories to prevent mass unrest. Others imposed emergency laws to control riots. Entire populations demanded their leaders step down for provoking a species capable of rewriting the balance of power in a matter of weeks. Religious movements emerged across various worlds, proclaiming humanity as a divine punishment or a cosmic test. Priests preached that humans were sent to correct centuries of arrogance. Pilgrims gathered at temples begging for protection from a threat they couldn't comprehend. Cultural myths shifted overnight. Older monsters of folklore were replaced by human silhouettes. Even the Council's military leadership fractured. Admirals accused one another of incompetence. Some demanded a preemptive strike on Earth, believing overwhelming violence was the only language humans respected. Others insisted any offensive action would provoke retaliation far worse than what the galaxy already endured. None of them agreed on a path forward, and while they argued, human fleets continued advancing system by system. Across conquered systems, human forces behaved with chilling consistency. They didn't slaughter civilians. They didn't raze cities. They didn't enslave or exploit. Instead, they seized military infrastructure, disabled planetary defenses, and moved on. That restraint terrified the galaxy even more. It proved humanity wasn't driven by chaos or hatred. It operated with a code, cold, moral, and absolute. It fought not for conquest but for correction. By the time Council intelligence finally compiled a coherent assessment, the conclusion stunned even hardline commanders. Humanity could end the war completely, but hadn't. Its advance was controlled, deliberate, purposeful. The strikes were designed not to destroy civilizations, but to dismantle their arrogance. That realization rippled across the galaxy. Humanity didn't want territory. It wanted the Council to understand what it had done, and why the consequences could no longer be avoided. The final blow didn't come as a barrage of weapons or a planet-shattering strike. It arrived as silence, an absolute, suffocating silence that settled across the entire Council capital. Hours earlier, every defensive array, orbital cannon, shield generator, and automated interceptor had been fully powered. Admirals believed humanity would never reach the heart of the galaxy. By dawn, all those systems were dead. No explosions, no breaches, no alarms, just a synchronized shutdown triggered by overrides the Council didn't know humans possessed. From orbit, the view was surreal. Thousands of human ships encircled the capital world in perfect formation, each vessel positioned so precisely that alien observers compared it to a surgical diagram. The fleet didn't fire. It didn't advance. It simply existed, an unspoken declaration of absolute dominance. On the surface, panic erupted in government districts. Diplomats demanded emergency evacuations, only to discover every shuttle bay locked by foreign encryption codes. Admirals tried issuing orders, but their command networks routed into endless loops. Guards attempted to mobilize, only to find their weapons unresponsive. Humanity hadn't broken through defenses, it had erased their relevance. Then a single transmission cut through every frequency in orbit and on the ground. The voice was calm, measured, unmistakably human. It carried no anger, no pride, no theatrical threat, only clarity. The envoy announced that the war was over. Humanity had achieved all necessary objectives. The Council was no longer in a position to negotiate terms. It was in a position to comply with them. The demands were not conquest. Humanity didn't ask for territory, tribute, or dominion. Instead, it required restitution for the murdered diplomats, accountability for those who authorized the attack, dismantling of exploitative economic treaties, and a permanent restructuring of council power to ensure no species could again target others with impunity. At first, alien leaders assumed these conditions were a starting point for bargaining. They attempted counteroffers, excuses, and legal arguments. Their messages returned unanswered. Humanity had spoken once. That was enough. When the council gathered for a final emergency session, representatives entered knowing their decisions no longer shaped the galaxy. The atmosphere was heavy, not with defiance, but with regret. Species that once mocked humanity avoided eye contact. Delegates who laughed at human, emotional instability, now trembled. The vote for unconditional compliance passed without opposition. Not a single representative dared abstain. As the agreement was signed, human vessels emitted a synchronized pulse visible from the surface, a muted flare marking the end of conflict. It wasn't a celebration. It was acknowledgement, a record for history that the war concluded not with destruction, but with enforced understanding. After the surrender, humanity withdrew most of its fleets from core systems. It left behind no occupation forces, no governors, no claims. Its ships vanished into slip space as quickly as they had arrived. The galaxy watched them depart with mixed emotions, relief that the devastation hadn't escalated, dread at how effortlessly it could have, and a deep, lingering awareness that humanity had allowed them to survive. The cultural shift began immediately. Historical archives revised their narratives, acknowledging humanity as a force capable of reshaping the galactic order. Military academies rewrote doctrines to treat engagements with humans as scenarios requiring maximum caution. Even entertainment changed. Villains once portrayed as ancient monsters were replaced with human silhouettes, symbols of intelligence, resilience, and terrifying precision. Across dozens of worlds, civilians debated why humanity hadn't annihilated the Council despite the opportunity. Analysts proposed theories: strategic restraint, ethical doctrine, long-term diplomacy, or simple pragmatism. But the truth came from the final sentence of humanity's transmission, a line replayed across thousands of news networks. "We do not seek to rule the galaxy. We seek to ensure no one believes they can harm humanity without consequence." That sentence settled into the collective consciousness of every species. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning wrapped in principle, one far more frightening than conquest. Dominators impose control, protectors impose limits. Humanity had chosen the latter, and the galaxy understood the cost of testing those limits again. From that day onward, no council member referred to Earth as a minor world, an inexperienced species, or a diplomatic inconvenience. Humanity became something far more significant, a power that acted not out of pride, but out of memory. A species that fought not for expansion, but for justice. A force that, when pushed past restraint, responded with an efficiency no empire could match. The galaxy never forgot the lesson. When humans declared war, they didn't just retaliate. They rewrote the definitions of power, consequence, and fear.